Hello and welcome to yet another conversation on EdTech Mondays Africa. My name is Doreen Bira, and it's so good to have you joining us on yet another conversation. And this time around, we are focused on Recommendation 7 of the 2024 Mastercard Foundation EdTech Conference on driving context-relevant innovation in EdTech across Africa, which is crucial because it ensures that technology-driven educational solutions actually address the continent's unique challenges, opportunities, and cultural dynamics. This requires establishing clear, timely guidelines and approval processes for content, tools, and licenses. Such frameworks help ensure that innovations are aligned with educational goals and needs while also streamlining the adoption of new technologies across the continent. For example, EdTech innovations that prioritize offline functionality, mobile accessibility, and low bandwidth usability can make a significant impact in areas where traditional online education models aren't feasible. In addition, effective innovations should empower African educators and learners to contribute to the development of their own education systems. And to this we ask, how can African educators and policymakers ensure that EdTech content aligns with local curricula while maintaining global relevance? Our panelists for this discussion are Maimouna Diakhate, who is the technical advisor to the Minister of National Education, Ministry of Education in Senegal, James Ong'ang'a, founder and CEO, LoHo Learning in Kenya, and Caleb Fugah, who is the Chief Business Development Officer at Dext Technologies in Ghana. Thank you all so much for joining us. And the first question I would like to pose to us all is, how can we balance innovative approaches in content creation with traditional teaching methodologies that are still widely used across the board?
I think one of the key critical things is that we ensure that the technology is being used within classroom. That allows us to have the teacher at the center of it and the learners. And at each iteration, we are ensuring that the technology gets better and better. One of the things that we do at LoHo Learning, an example would be sorting and grouping, which is a concept in preschool. The book would basically ask the learner, after watching a video, to use bottle tops that are in the classroom and sort them based on color and things like that, ensuring that we've accommodated the traditional teaching methods that are there. The other thing that we do is LoHo becomes an enabler. We don't become the single source of truth, allowing for the teachers to also participate in content development. This ensures that downstream there's a sustainable way of ensuring that the traditional teaching mechanisms are in line with what we're innovating. And that's not only for the teachers. We also have a segment where learners can also chime in and ensure that their views are also part of the content that we are reselling. We are a marketplace of multiple publishers. This ensures that we have different perspectives of the same concept that is being taught.
You know, we do have the exercise book, textbook sort of learning, and then we have the digital content sort of learning, which is only accessible online. How are you able to strike a balance between the offline and online methods of learning?
A project can be a project that requires you to make a clay model, but that exercise comes from a digital perspective. And that can be, once you've planted your tree, take a photo of it and share it within the LoHo forum for learners. So that's how we blend that. And even in our go-to-market strategies, we ensure that the publishers that we have on board, we have several physical activities that link you to the digital activities. So this can be as simple as scanning as an image of a skeleton in your textbook, and you see the AR version of it within your phone or tablet and things like that. So there are multiple strategies that we do to ensure that the two are talking to each other.
Mrs. Maimouna, let me come to you now. And the question I would like to ask you is, how can African innovators and policymakers ensure that EdTech content aligns with the local curricula while mainstreaming global relevance or maintaining global relevance? That's something I'm really keen on hearing from you, especially from the Senegal side of things.
Je pense que, en fait, pour que les contenus locaux soient bien pris en compte par les EdTech, il faut de la co-construction. C'est-à-dire que quand on parle de l'utilisation du numérique dans les enseignements-apprentissages, il faut savoir que c'est plusieurs parties prenantes qui interviennent. Donc, il ne faudrait pas qu'il y ait des startups qui sont de leur côté et qui produisent des choses en laissant de côté les enseignants, les élèves et même le personnel administratif. Si nous prenons le cas du Sénégal, les contenus, même en physique, même en présentiel, sont bien réglementés. Et donc, il faudrait que ces contenus-là puissent être digitalisés de façon à les rendre plus interactifs, de façon à pouvoir différencier les enseignements-apprentissages, mais tout en tenant compte vraiment du contenu local intrinsèque. C'est-à-dire que dans tous les pays du monde, quand on digitalise, ça ne veut pas dire qu'on va aller prendre ce que l'autre a fait. Il faut que ce soit nos contenus, donc il faut que ce soit de la co-construction avec les enseignants. L'impression que j'ai, c'est que très souvent, quand on parle de numérique, on va créer des choses, on crée des contenus, on crée des ressources, et après, on vient simplement dire aux enseignants, implémenter ces ressources-là, utiliser ces ressources. Il faut de la co-construction avec eux, sans oublier, évidemment, les élèves également. Donc, moi, ce que j'aurais proposé, c'est vraiment de l'enracinement, ne pas rejeter ce qui est fait en présentiel, parce que même si les choses ont évolué, il y a quand même du bon. Ça reste du bon. Et maintenant, utiliser le numérique comme un outil, comme un canal de diffusion pour mieux démocratiser les enseignements-apprentissages. Mais vraiment, je prône la co-construction. C'est-à-dire, il y a ceux qui ont la technologie, mais il y a ceux qui ont la pédagogie. Ce sont les enseignants. On ne peut pas enseigner via le numérique en laissant de côté les pédagogues. Si j'avais un mot-clé à donner, ce serait co-construction.
Caleb, I want to come to you just to hear your thoughts on this. Mrs. Maimouna talks about co-creation with the teachers. She did talk about with the learners, with the teachers. What are your thoughts on this?
Here in Ghana, we moved from objective-based curriculum studies, which was more of rote learning, to standards-based curriculum learning, which is more of a learner-centered approach to teaching and learning. And I believe that to develop a 21st century relevant curriculum, you don't only need the input of the teachers, you need the inputs of the learners, because they are the receiving end. And so that is where we stand. We believe that it should be a full circle engagement where even parents are supposed to be contacted. Even the traditional people in our society must be engaged, because we are trying to create a curriculum that is going to be all-encompassing. And so that is what informed what we do as a company in Ghana, where we consulted the educators, i.e. the regulators of our space, who have come up with standards-based curriculum learning opportunity. So we looked at the curriculum specifically, and we designed tools with tradition at the background. What do we mean? We looked at tradition because we wanted to make the learning very close to bring the learning very close to the learners. How? You eat maize in your everyday life. How do we use maize to generate electricity as part of the curriculum content generation? For instance, there's a very fantastic activity we have which focuses on formation of clouds in a bottle. So we are looking at the everyday clouds, the rain challenges we are facing in parts of the farming communities, and how children can now have the confidence to create rain through using simple bottles, okay, at their micro piloting level. Are you with me? And so it's an all-encompassing thing. And so the standard-based curriculum in Ghana currently focuses on making students global citizens, of course, but be mindful of tradition and how we can carry on from there.
How are you co-creating? Do you develop the solution, then co-create afterwards, or do you do some sort of due diligence with the education ecosystem and then go back and work on your prototypes or on your innovations in this case. How is it working, and how are you making sure that those pieces of content align to the Ghana curricula, for example?
As an EdTech solution provider, we started off with having information from the challenge we ourselves experienced growing up in school. And
Right.
it was probably the lack of physics tools for teaching and learning at the basic level. And so that is what informed our first innovative solution, the science set. So it was just a physics set that was providing resistors, capacitors, speak of, how do we call it, diodes, dry cells, trying to put things together to form a simple electronic circuit, okay? And so from there, we realized that there was interest. And so we went back, we looked at the curriculum and we said, okay, what can we do to make sure that every single tool we are producing is specifically aligned with the curriculum? And because we believe in our innovative capacity, we understood what was at stake. We are producing something which should be affordable, because you know that the standards of living in Africa, parents want to have something which is more affordable. And we looked at how easily a teacher can integrate this in the classroom, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And how personalized the learners could have it. And also the fine line between screen technology and hands-on learning experiences. So we sort of always confuse EdTech solutions for screen technology, which is not the case. There's students have an opportunity to learn things with your hands and also be able to have a combination of the digital understanding or the digital solutions as well. And so that is where the fine balance is. Keeping things the way they are, however, putting together other layers of sort of interdisciplinary approach to the solution. And I believe as we progress, you get to really understand how we were able to shrink a whole traditional science lab into simple boxes such that every child can have their learning too. And it's as affordable as a textbook.
Caleb has talked about how they're able to, bring an entire science lab into these little boxes called science kits. In this case, the Dext technologies. How are you able to do the same? If you could just walk us through step by step on how you're able to make sure there's a balance between the local content that's created and how you're able to mount that onto your online versions of the innovation.
We look at what do we need to innovate fast, because the spectrum is quite long, and we don't want to replicate what is working well within the traditional methods. So in our case, one of the things that we can do much better than the traditional method is make books come to life. For example, a digital atlas, and I normally tell this story whenever I have engagements with learners. I come from the eastern side of Kenya, which is Kisumu, and I always thinking of when can I go to Mombasa when I was much younger in grade 8 or class 8. And whenever we go to class 8, we used to have an annual trip to Mombasa. And when it got to my ear, we were not able to go to for some reason, I can't remember. And I was very devastated. So when building up the atlas, we ensure that every county in Kenya has a video element to it, so that a learner like myself in grade 8 or grade 6 can now start imagining how Mombasa looks like, how Nairobi, the capital, looks like, how Garissa looks like. So there are those multimedia content that we do better than traditional teaching methods that aid the teacher. There is no better way for a teacher to express to a learner how the coastal environment looks like without a video. So that ensures that we know where to bring in our innovation. So an example, similar to what the Dext technology are doing, most Kenyans who go through high school education, they don't get a one-on-one time to do the experiments because it's too expensive. The labs are few and things like that. So one of the innovations that we worked on first was how do we have a virtual STEM lab, where you can do your practicals at home with your low bandwidth phone or with your low bandwidth tablet and things like that, to ensure that you can start doing those experiments and you understand the process. When you get to the national examination, you basically already have the concepts in place. So back to the process. So what we do is we ensure that we look at the spectrum, pick areas that we can do better with digital technology, and work on those first. In special needs education, for example, we work with KISE, Kenya Special Needs Institute of Special Needs. And if you look at the Braille books that they have, they're quite voluminous. A small piece of textbook is quite a huge. So when we are thinking of technology, that is a first touch to resolve that issue by using digital orbit readers, for example. With digital orbit readers, the voluminous content is broken down into a very small piece of gadget, and they can have a lot of information in that one piece of gadget. Of course, it's offline and things like that.
Maimouna, I'm coming back to you because based off of what Caleb and James have just told us, there seems to be a lot of co-creation already happening. But I want to hear from you. What are some of the strategies that can be employed to promote inclusivity in digital learning content for students, for example, or learners with disabilities in Senegal and anywhere else across the continent?
Je pense que déjà, pour qu'on puisse aller vers l'inclusion, ce qu'il faudrait, c'est que tous ceux qui travaillent dans la technologie pour l'éducation tiennent en compte l'accessibilité. Il faut que les plateformes, les sites web soient accessibles, c'est-à-dire que l'accessibilité soit inclue dans le développement avant même qu'on pense à eux dès le départ, en prenant l'accessibilité sur les plateformes. Ça, c'est un point. Le deuxième point, c'est par rapport aux équipements. C'est-à-dire que pour les personnes en situation de handicap, on ne peut pas leur donner n'importe quel équipement. Très souvent, quand on achète un équipement pour une école, on achète des ordinateurs, des tablettes, mais sans tenir compte de cette accessibilité-là à l'outil pour la personne handicapée, que ce soit un handicap physique, que ce soit un handicap visuel, que ce soit un handicap auditif, ils ont besoin de matériel spécifique. Donc, dans la dotation en équipement, il faudrait tenir compte également de ces spécificités-là pour les personnes en situation de handicap. C'est la même chose en termes de formation. Quand je dis en termes de formation, non seulement pour les apprenants, mais également pour les enseignants. Parce que si je suis enseignante et que on me donne du matériel, on me demande de faire des cours en ligne pour des personnes en situation de handicap, si moi je n'ai pas été formée sur ce volet inclusion, je pourrais éventuellement ne pas savoir que je dois changer de méthode quand je m'adresse à des personnes à besoins spécifiques. Donc, il faudrait, pour résumer, tenir compte de ces spécificités, de ces besoins spécifiques pour ces personnes-là en situation de handicap. Et surtout, ce que j'ai remarqué, c'est que très souvent, les gens, ils pensent handicap physique, mais ils oublient les autres types de handicap. Ce qu'il faudrait, c'est tenir compte de tous les types de handicap pour vraiment être inclusif. Et dans la formation des personnes qui doivent encadrer ces personnes en situation de handicap, tenir compte de leur formation. Voilà ce que j'aurais, moi, suggéré aux décideurs, ce que j'aurais suggéré aux encadreurs. Et pour revenir un peu sur la question des contenus locaux, justement, dans les curricula, dans l'élaboration des curricula, intégrer le numérique en amont et non pas faire les curricula d'abord et ensuite penser au numérique.
Caleb, I want to come to you just based off of that. Do you think that your solution, in this case, bringing your science lab into a Dext kit, does it take care of learners, say, in marginalized areas or learners with disabilities in this case? Because James talked about how they're able to create digital content for learners with disabilities. Is it the same thing with you? How are you able to make that correlation, especially for learners who cannot afford? I know you said that the kit is the price of a textbook, but let's talk about the learners in marginalized communities or learners living and learning with disabilities. How's that working for you?
We have cascade category of inclusive approaches we have inculcated in the tool that we call the Dext Science Set. The first and foremost one is it takes care of children. I'm very careful when I speak about these things because they are children first or they are learners first. So learners with hearing disabilities, okay? And so because these are physical, tangible materials, they can feel it. Now we are putting together the human digestive system, okay? So every child can have it, feel it, touch it, and then use it, okay? Even students with sight problems can still feel the shape of the human digestive system because of the way it is personalized, and they can take it in and out of the classroom. That's one thing. Number two is that because it does not require electricity, all you need is just a table and a trained teacher. The farthest you could go is when you have access to internet and you want to self-learn, you use YouTube to access the videos. Okay, so it is designed to be kept at that level where students can now develop the confidence and interest, underlying interest in the pursuing of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in a not too distant future. The number three thing to look at is assessment. Students get to pay attention to the things that they are assessed on with. Okay, now how does assessment improve inclusivity? There are learners who learn with their hands. Others have brain power. In this instance, our sets sort of helps students who have brain power to do better, and students who learn with their hands to do better. And so, if they are going to be assessed, we don't only assess them based on their brain powers that they have, but on their ability to use their hands. Now, this might be far-fetched, but Africa has a problem of importation. We are a consuming-driven country or continent. How are we using our curriculum currently to inspire the children to be producer-minded, but not consumer-driven? Okay? And so when we speak about inclusivity, we look at it in a whole lot of spectrum, as my brother James would want to say.
And speaking of the fact that we are heavily a continent that consumes external content, what foundational technology policies do you think need to be in place to make sure that we have equitable access to these digital learning tools that we are coming up with, that we are innovating, and that our governments might be a little bit slow to embracing, but are getting there?
It's very important that the Mastercard Foundation, helping us at our level, also need to educate governments for them to understand the changing trends of education in the 21st century. What that means is that we could use EdTech solutions not to only solve educational problems, but also solve unemployment problems in our country. What do I mean? We started off 8 years ago and we're employing about 5 people. Currently, we are employing over 80 workers. The question I ask myself is, what would these people be if had not been for our intervention? And so they should see this as more of a partnership to grow not just the schools, but the economy in general. And as I speak today, and I'm a proud African to say this, because we have over 500 schools in the UK who use our products we manufacture in Ghana. That in itself is a statement of that reality where we are telling the younger generation that you can also do something for yourself and change the narrative out there.
You've heard what Caleb has said. And so are you satisfied? What more do you think our governments need to do?
I want to point out that most of the Mastercard Foundation executives have been becoming ministerial leaders in various governments, Nigeria and Rwanda, and I think that's a positive thing. It means they're picking people with intent, and if this can happen across Africa, and I see the change being sped up. But what I hear Caleb saying is that And this is also true in the local context. We have the ICT policy for education in Kenya already in place, but there's still very little meaningful collaboration between us and the government. And most of the collaboration efforts are either funded by private parties or something external from public effort. So we need a lot of spaces where we can talk and ensure that we are collaborating together. That way we can move this. Now, one of the key hindrances for us, and which should be resolved at a policy level, is the barrier of compliance. So in Kenya, for example, it costs roughly between 150,000 to 250,000. That's about $1,000 to $2,000 to have one piece of content approved. And LoHo, for example, we have about 3,000 digital pieces of content. So you can imagine it is an exercise that is extremely, extremely costly. So that becomes a very big barrier for most EdTech companies, especially without a lot of capital. And the other thing is that there are some solutions that are even difficult to evaluate because of those formulas or those barriers that they've created for compliance purposes. For example, for us, we have a product that uses AI, Kalamu, and it is a generative AI that creates additional content based on what the learner inputs or the teacher inputs. How does it go through the evaluation process for you to get that accreditation from KICD? So it means that compliance structure also needs to be updated to ensure that all EdTech tools can be evaluated. And a company similar to Caleb's here in Kenya, like Funky Science, they do science kits, and they went to KICD for approval. And there is literally no policy in place to evaluate such kits and ensure that they are compliant.
Maimouna, you've heard what Caleb has said. There are 500 schools outside of the continent that are using his solution. And yet in his own country, there are just about 410 schools that are using the solution. And then you can see the challenge that James has talked about as well, where he's talking about how it costs between $1,000 and $2,000 to approve each piece of content. How can we ensure that digital infrastructure supports the widespread adoption of educational technologies? Because on one hand, we're looking at unaffordable costs, and then on the other hand, we're looking at slow adoption of these EdTech innovations. How do we make sure that we are aligned? In addition to the co-creation that you talked about, there are many other challenges that need to be sorted out. What would be your quick solutions from a government perspective to the innovators and also from a government perspective to the private sector?
C'est d'abord aller vers la possibilité d'une production d'équipements ou d'infra locaux. C'est-à-dire que ce soit nous qui produisions plutôt que d'aller acheter. Je pense que pour une adoption généralisée de l'EdTech, je commencerai par ça d'abord. Ce qu'il faudrait, c'est assurer la connectivité. Aujourd'hui, en Afrique, un peu partout, on parle de EdTech, on parle de numérique. Et moi, je pense que la base, le fondement, c'est d'abord la connectivité. C'est la connectivité. Aujourd'hui, par exemple, la Fondation Mastercard fait beaucoup de choses en termes d'achat d'équipement. Mais si on achète de l'équipement et que, en fait, on ne peut pas l'utiliser parce qu'il n'y a pas de connectivité, ça pose problème. L'autre point aussi qui me semble important, c'est la formation. La formation, non pas des élèves, parce que moi, je suis enseignante. Si je suis formée à utiliser le numérique et que je l'utilise dans ma classe, automatiquement, mes élèves vont l'utiliser. C'est vrai qu'on peut former les élèves, mais la formation des enseignants reste un impératif, à mon avis, et parfois, c'est un peu laissé en rade. Il y a également une partie prenante qui est très souvent oubliée. Ce sont les parents. Ce sont les parents. Parce que aujourd'hui, il y a tellement de mauvaises perceptions par rapport au numérique que si les parents ne sont pas sensibilisés, l'enfant peut utiliser le numérique à l'école, mais quand il vient à la maison et qu'il doit faire ses exercices, le parent peut être réticent. Donc, je pense que pour une adoption généralisée de l'EdTech, notamment dans les zones rurales, il faut tenir compte de trois choses principalement. Et ça, avant les infrastructures qui coûtent cher, avant le coût. Parce que même si on règle ce problème d'infrastructure, du coût de l'infrastructure et qu'on a les culturels, socio-culturels qui fait que tu viens me proposer quelque chose, tu achètes quelque chose pour moi, tu me dis c'est bon pour moi, mais moi je n'en veux pas. Parce que culturellement, je ne l'accepte pas. Parce que j'ai des perceptions, des préjugés par rapport à cette chose. Donc, il faudrait gérer le volet socio-culturel. Parce que c'est une nouvelle, c'est quelque chose de tout à fait nouveau. On demande aux parents, aux enseignants de sortir de leur zone de confort. Il faut vraiment tenir compte de ça. Le deuxième point extrêmement important, c'est la connectivité. Quel que soit le matériel, la qualité du matériel, le coût, quel que soit ce qu'on apporte, s'il n'y a pas de connectivité, ça ne marche pas. Et troisième chose, ce qu'il faudrait, c'est qu'on ait une certaine souveraineté en Afrique par rapport à la production du matériel. On peut aller vers la formation de gens qui vont créer ce matériel dont on a besoin. Je pense qu'un matériel créé localement coûtera forcément moins cher qu'un matériel qui est importé. Donc, en gros, voilà les 3 éléments sur lesquels, pour moi, il faudrait que les gouvernements africains et les acteurs du secteur privé se mettent ensemble pour travailler et de façon synergique, que les expériences de certains pays puissent être capitalisées par d'autres et que l'on puisse avancer ensemble.
Just out of curiosity, does Senegal have an approval process of digital content or EdTech content? And if yes, what are some of those recommendations you would like to pass on to the innovators who are creating solutions that tie into Senegal's EdTech ecosystem?
Je peux dire oui, parce que le Sénégal a déjà une stratégie du numérique dans l'éducation. Cette stratégie du numérique dans l'éducation est actuellement en cours de développement. Nous avons terminé de l'élaborer et nous sommes pratiquement dans la mise en œuvre. Parallèlement, une stratégie des REL, c'est-à-dire des ressources éducatives libres, a également été élaborée au Sénégal. Et aujourd'hui, dans la mise en œuvre de cette stratégie du numérique dans l'éducation, nous nous sommes dit que nous allons le faire en format pilote pour tester. Comme vous l'avez dit tout à l'heure, nous avons 3 zones pilotes. Nous avons une zone pilote rurale. C'est dans le sud du Sénégal. Et c'est une zone pilote vraiment où il y a des difficultés de connectivité, des difficultés d'infra, des difficultés en termes de formation. Vraiment, toutes les difficultés sont réunies. Réussir là-bas, pour nous, c'est réussir tout le Sénégal. Nous avons un autre pilote dans une zone où c'est plutôt le côté socio-culturel qui nous a intéressés parce que c'est important. C'est une zone assez fondamentalement religieuse, donc où l'on se dit qu'il peut y avoir de la réticence, plus de réticence qu'ailleurs, parce que la réticence, elle est partout, mais on peut en avoir plus là-bas qu'ailleurs. Donc, réussir là-bas aussi, ça nous permet d'apprendre et de capitaliser par rapport aux réticences socio-culturelles dont il faut tenir compte quand on fait du numérique dans l'éducation. Et le troisième pilote, c'est un pilote qui semble a priori plus facile. C'est une zone urbaine où il y a plus d'infrastructures, où la connectivité est un peu plus, disons, on a un peu plus de connectivité, où il y a déjà de la formation. Donc, si on cumule ces 3 pilotes, ça nous permettra en fait après d'évaluer et d'aller vraiment à l'échelle. Et c'est là où justement, nous comptons beaucoup sur la Fondation Mastercard pour éventuellement nous accompagner sur ces pilotes-là, où nous prenons en compte toutes les parties prenantes dont j'ai parlé tout à l'heure, élèves, enseignants, personnel administratif et parents. Beaucoup de gens oublient souvent le numérique dans l'éducation. Il faut tous ces volets-là. Voilà, donc c'est là où nous allons actuellement au niveau du Sénégal.
So in this case, do we then have an approval body that looks at the content, or this is something that is yet to be put in place?
Pour les contenus, aujourd'hui au Sénégal, nous avons plusieurs plateformes avec des contenus déjà produits plutôt. Et en fait, ce que j'ai oublié de dire, c'est que le Sénégal actuellement est dans le processus de révision de ses curricula. Et dans le cadre de la révision de ces curricula, le numérique occupe une place centrale. Donc, déjà, nous allons réviser les curricula en tenant en compte qu'il faut que le numérique soit introduit non seulement comme objet d'apprentissage, mais également comme outil d'enseignement. Ça, c'est le premier point. Le deuxième point, par rapport à la validation des contenus, des ressources produites, parce qu'il y a beaucoup de ressources actuellement qui sont produites au Sénégal sur certaines plateformes que vous pouvez d'ailleurs visiter, Senprof et autres. Toutes ces productions-là sont validées par l'IGF. L'IGF, c'est l'Inspection générale de l'éducation et de la formation. Donc, les contenus sont validés par l'IGF. Dans le cadre de la stratégie du numérique dans l'éducation, nous travaillons vraiment de façon très inclusive en intégrant autant les directions pédagogiques, l'IGF qui a en charge la validation des curricula, qui a en charge d'ailleurs l'écriture des curricula, les enseignants eux-mêmes, les élèves, les parents d'élèves. Toutes les parties sont prises en compte pour qu'on ait vraiment un numérique introduit, mais de façon vraiment inclusive et acceptée. C'est pour cette raison que nous avons également élaboré une stratégie, parce qu'il en faut. Quand on veut faire sortir les gens de leur zone de confort, il faut penser déjà à une stratégie de conduite du changement pour que ce soit accepté. D'autant plus que, comme on le sait, il y a beaucoup de dérives sur le numérique, sur les réseaux sociaux, ce qui fait que beaucoup de gens souvent ont tendance à assimiler le numérique à du négatif, ce qui n'est pas le cas. Ça peut être un excellent outil pour booster la qualité des enseignements-apprentissages et renforcer les compétences des apprenants.
Caleb and James, now coming to you guys, and in closing, really, sustainability is one of the key things when we're talking about innovation and EdTech innovation in this case. So I want to hear from us all in terms of making sure that the technologies we are developing are living a lifetime that is longer than what we see most innovations doing. You know, they want to put out a product, put it out there in the market, test it out. If it fails, they move on, create another one. Maybe the government has just approved one piece of content and then it doesn't have a life of its own. How do we make sure that our technologies or our innovations are sustainable, are affordable, and also accessible?
I will respond in two ways. Internally, what we can do as entrepreneurs, and externally, what support we require. Internally, I think the most important thing, this was mentioned much earlier on, when designing this product, there needs to be universal design languages in place to ensure that we are developing a product for everyone. So we bring everyone on board. And what that simply means is that we are talking about affordability. This is a product that everyone can at least afford. Secondly, there is inclusivity, so ensuring that everyone is brought on board. And then the third one basically is accessibility. And here we are talking about offline, fast, and hybrid scenarios. So when you have these principles on the onset, you already have the sustainability already in play. What we do over on top of that is ensure that you have the teacher at the center of it. The teacher is a doctor. So you want the teacher to give you as much feedback as possible, but don't forget the learner. The learner is the user. So ensure that you have elements that will ensure that there is engagement. So gamification, dashboard, and things like that. The funder is the parent. So they need to be, part of parcel, the main stakeholders also as well. So we need to ensure that the cost is right. That's normally one of the key things for the parent. And the other one is the parent wants to know how is the learner performing. So link your product to outcomes and you'll win the parents. And of course, the big brother, the government, they want to ensure that whatever you're doing is in line with their policies, so curriculum aligned. Externally, one of the key important things, so education is a public good. An example in Kenya, it's estimated that we have around 15 million learners, out of which about, I would say, 3 million are in private schools. So if you don't have a government as one of your key customers, you're playing in a very small league, the 3 million league, you're out of the 12 million. We need the government to either offer subsidies for the schools that they sponsor to afford, or offer capitation for these schools to decide which EdTech technology they want to buy. And this is very critical. So this ensures that LoHo is now playing in the entire 15 million pool. And that will be very key for sustainability. So we don't produce elitist products, we produce a product that everyone can consume.
Caleb, what more do you have to add to what James has said?
The moment you stop creating, you begin to die as an innovative company. And so you have to understand the space in which you are operating, where curricula can be changed at any time. And so you need to also project and understand that you have to be able to pivot at any point in time as an EdTech solution provider. And so we understand that governments, local governments can different policies, different thinking. And so if you're an EdTech solution provider, you must have your systems to be able to be sustainable. Also, don't treat government as your savior. If your solution works, the private sector players would come for them. And so I would advise that as EdTech solution providers, let's focus on the private sector. I mean, when we keep hitting and keep doing the right thing, and of course, we mount a strong EdTech solution leadership, we would definitely one day get government to support us one way or the other in terms of being a big buyer. And don't only look into your small, limited economy, but let me just take this opportunity to throw more emphasis on what EdTech solutions are. It is not screen solutions. I want to reiterate. EdTech solutions are not screen solutions. You require advanced technology tools to create simple tools that will help learners engage practically. So what problems are we trying to solve? We are trying to solve the soft skills regarding creativity, innovative, communication. Those are the foundational fundamentals of skills that we are looking at. And then at the core of it, students should be able to have fun while learning science. But we want to also say that enough of the talk, let's get boots on the ground, and then let's start implementations. For me, I think I mentioned earlier, one of my core objectives is to change the way we assess learners in our part of the continent. Right from the basic school, we know that there's a problem that we are a consuming-driven continent. How do we prepare the younger generation with the mindset of being a producer-minded generation?
Maimouna, I'm giving you the last word. How do we make sure that the technologies we are approving in the government side are, one, sustainable, are accessible, and are affordable? What would you recommend be done for this to happen?
Alors, je pense que ce qu'il faudrait, en tout cas pour ce qui est du Sénégal, c'est déjà, nous avons l'avantage d'avoir une stratégie écrite, élaborée, validée, et que nous sommes actuellement dans une dynamique de mettre en œuvre, en tenant en compte tous les paramètres dont on a parlé tout à l'heure, connectivité, équipement, formation, sensibilisation. Donc, je pense que ce qu'il faudrait, c'est une collaboration entre le secteur privé, le secteur public, les startups, pour qu'on soit en mode co-création. Parce que les startups ont la particularité de pouvoir aller plus vite que l'école, qui est un milieu assez réglementé, donc qui ne peut qu'y aller très, très lentement. L'autre avantage que nous avons, si tout le monde met la main à la pâte au Sénégal, et nous comptons, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, sur la fondation, sur les startups que vous accompagnez, sur tout le secteur privé, nous lançons un appel en tant que ministère de l'Éducation nationale à toute la communauté sénégalaise pour nous accompagner dans la mise en œuvre de cette stratégie du numérique qui est aujourd'hui un pan incontournable pour être vraiment dans la modernité parce que permettant de renforcer l'accès et de démocratiser le savoir. Et je vous remercie de nous avoir donné l'opportunité, voilà, de nous exprimer ici pour que partager avec nos collègues du Ghana, du Kenya, sur les pratiques que nous faisons.
And that pretty much brings us to the end of this conversation where we've been speaking about guided, context-relevant innovation with clear and timely guidelines and approval processes for content, tools, and licenses to encourage innovation, investment, and technology mainstreaming. Thank you all for joining us on this conversation. Until the next one, it's bye-bye for now. My name is Doreen Bira.